Good evening. The League of Women Voters and the City of Fort Collins welcome you to this forum for the Poudre School District Board of Directors. I'm Peggy Lapointe from the League of Women Voters, and I will serve as moderator. This forum is being live streamed at www.fcgov.com/FCTV/. It is also being broadcast live on FCTV on Comcast and Connection Channel 14 in Fort Collins. A recorded copy will be posted to the city website. It will also be posted to the website of the League of Women Voters of Larimer County and to our voter service website, vote411.org. We ask that you not record the forum using your cell phones because the FCC requires the program to be recorded in its entirety. If you have used a note card to write down a question, please pass them to the aisle so that the League volunteers can collect them. We will screen questions for duplication, and we will attempt to represent all issues of interest during our limited time. The candidates will be in the lobby after the forum if you have questions that we did not have time to cover. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization with a goal of helping citizens be informed voters. We do not endorse any party or candidate. This is a forum, not a debate. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to introduce themselves. I will pose questions to the candidates, and each will have 90 seconds to respond. Then each candidate will be given 90 seconds for a closing statement. I request the audience members refrain from expressing support or opposition to candidate statements so that we can proceed smoothly. Ballots will be mailed to registered voters on October 10th. Locations of the drop boxes are listed on vote.larimer.gov. If you are mailing your ballot, allow plenty of time. The county clerk and recorder must receive ballots, or they must be in a drop box by 7 p.m. on November 4th. In-person voting begins on October 27th. Locations and hours are located at vote.larimer.com. Please be aware that on November's ballot, there will be 2 Colorado State ballot issues, 2 Larimer County issues, and 10 Fort Collins ballot issues. Our website, vote411.org, can give voters the opportunity to register, find which district they live in, read candidate responses to our questions, and offer nonpartisan review of all of those ballot issues. Now, let me introduce the candidates. Running in District C, we have Carla Bays and Sabrina Herrick. Running in District D, Tom Griggs and Karonda Ziegler. Running in District E, Andrew Spain. Let's begin. Thank you, Tom. We'll begin our introductory statements with candidate Bays. You have 90 seconds, ma'am.
Thank you, Peggy. It's loud. And good evening. Thank you so much for being here and for giving us your time tonight. I have lived in Fort Collins for 26 years, and I've been working in our community for over 19 with our charitable nonprofit sector. And so I've seen a pretty broad swath of our most vulnerable population and the organizations that help make sure that they have access to resources. I've got 2 kids in Poudre School District, and They have been thriving in the district, but I also am keenly aware that a lot of the children in our district don't have the same access to resources that they do. I've been called to run for school board because I really truly feel like we need to act now and work harder to make all of the students in our district feel like they have a strong sense of belonging and like they all have equitable access to education. I think that's about all I've got now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Candidate Herrick?
Hello, my name is Sabrina. I've been living in Fort Collins since 2011, moved away for a few years, but actually moved back to Fort Collins for Poudre School District. When my daughter was diagnosed with autism, we'd heard very good things about Poudre School District, and so we came back to Fort Collins for the school district. My inspiration to run is actually very personal to me. 2.5 years ago, I learned that my daughter was one of 11 victims of a school employee who was abusing autistic children on the bus. And I found myself asking, how does something like this happen? So I started attending board meetings to try and find answers on that. And I've built my campaign off of my observations of attending board meetings and seeing how leadership functions. So my biggest focuses in my campaign are I'd like to improve student safety, particularly for disabled students. I'd also like to make sure that our staff are protected in their rights and improve transparency in how our leadership is making decisions.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs?
My name is Tom Griggs. First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this event. It's a very important event for the community, of which I have been a member for 25 years. I came here to teach teachers for 20 years at the University of Northern Colorado. During that time, I was raising my own kids, mostly as a single father. Through the Poudre School District, they had wonderful educational opportunities and have gone on to have great lives as young adults. And I have served in a range of capacities and a breadth of different roles in the school system, as a volunteer, as an employee. I retired from UNC in 2020 and have been serving for 5 years as a substitute in Thompson and Poudre school districts. And I believe it's the range and depth of my experience and my living in this community that gives me a unique sort of a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the district. And I want to continue with my passion for education by serving on the school board so I can contribute that knowledge base and that experience to the board's work.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karonda Ziegler, and I'm running for District D, like donuts. I'm also a Poudre Education Association endorsed candidate, and I'm running for school board because I grew up in a home with addiction, and it was the bus drivers and the teachers and the cafeteria workers that made a difference. And I want to make certain that all of our students, regardless of background, experience, or identity, they receive the same type of care. So when they leave, they're proud of being a graduate of Poudre School District. I currently have 3 kids in the district. I have a PhD in education, and I've spent 2 decades focused on student success. So that's helping students transition, stay in school, as well as graduate. For me, a district has 3 pillars: for a good foundation, shared leadership, so that we're not simply making decisions based on what's given to us or who has access to us, to make certain we are future ready, thinking about how our decisions we make today also impact our future. And lastly, safety and support for our students and our educators. And that involves both physical, emotional, and social safety and support. Thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to be here with you tonight.
Thank you. Candidate Spain?
I suppose I'm the lucky one up here because I'm actually running unopposed, which is good, but that means to me that I've got to work extra hard to earn your trust, as well as to build the transparency and accountability that I believe is needed in our school district. Graduated from Fort Collins High School way back in 1984, back when it was still on the building on Remington Street. Now have the last of my kids in school between me and my wife. We've had 3 go through the system, and he's currently a junior. I bring a background of education, healthcare, political science, and leadership to the role. I'm already currently on the board, filling out the rest of Carolyn Reed's term, so I'm actually also running as an incumbent. So I'm looking forward to working with the community to build an even better school district in our new modern era, because the reality is we can't think that we can run a school district like it was from 50 years ago. Things are so very, very different. And we have an amazing community that wants to see the school district meet that challenge. And I learned that through being on the steering committee just a few short years ago, when I was involved with that, when we were talking about consolidation and closures and such like that. So looking forward to working with everyone. I'm also one of the PEA endorsed candidates along with Karonda and Carla. So looking to earn your vote and build our trust.
Thank you. Now we'll have our first question. And we'll begin with candidate Herrick and come back around. What are the 3 most important tasks of a school board?
So I would say to start out, monitoring policy, making sure that it's up to date, which is actually an issue that I'm interested in working on. Over the last few years, a few policies have come up for review that hadn't been altered in a decade. And so I think we need to be making sure that those are looked at regularly. After that, I would say making sure that the superintendent is well instructed in what we need to be working on to improve things for our students. I think that we need to bring around a culture of continuous improvement. And I think it's very important that our superintendent understands that. And the third one would be listening to the community and hearing what everyone has to say and taking into account everyone's opinions on what needs to be happening in the school district.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs?
The school board is the link between the larger community and the school district itself. And under policy governance, which is currently the structure in which we inform and guide as representatives of the community what we would like to see happening at the district, we have one employee. Our one employee is the superintendent. And so a critical role that we have is communicating well with the superintendent regarding our goals and our desires for the community, and a solid means of evaluating his or her performance, as the case may be, and in that process, we need to make sure that we are keeping current with what's going on. The fact, as Sabrina mentioned, that we haven't reviewed policy governance in nearly a decade is a real problem, and it suggests also that we don't have the way the job is defined currently is a little shaky, because it seems like one of the contributing factors to that reality is that the board members don't seem to have the time to do that with the other responsibilities they have. So I'm concerned about all those areas.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler?
You all probably will hear some duplication here. And so what I would say in terms of the 3 important tasks, one for sure is the superintendent. I think in 2 ways, though, as we supervise the superintendent, to support the superintendent, but also hold the superintendent accountable. I believe that it's ensuring that our district has academic excellence, and not simply just in test scores, but how do we help shape pathways for all of our students in the district to achieve that outcome of graduation, as well as giving them the right tools to be successful along that pathway. And third, being a good steward of resources. I think oftentimes the community has supported us, even recently, in terms of passing bonds and other ways to fund our schools. How are we being careful of how we use those funds, where we use those funds, and honor the commitments that we've made as a district?
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
The job of the board, of course, is laid out in policy, starting, of course, with the one employee that we have. So I feel a little sorry for the superintendent sometimes because he's got 7 bosses, which probably makes it a little challenging for him. But we work collectively to, of course, guide him, address things that need to be done, all those pieces that are part of that puzzle to make sure that he can be an effective leader for all of his staff. I think there's 2 other functions that we as directors need to engage in. That one of those, frankly, is to aggregate information, which implies that we're going to need to listen to you all, to go learn, to hear from what everyone is saying, pull it all together. So that way we can go to our 3rd duty, which is to decide. Because then that all, from our decisions that get made, now goes back through the superintendent to the school district and perhaps to other organizations within the community to enable what we've decided and build the school district.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
From what I've seen, a lot of trust has been eroded in our community between our school board, our families, and our educators. I think that it's the school board's job to help create transparency that lends itself to trust in the long run. So I would suggest that we build something like the city has, a dashboard, somewhere where information lives that allows people to see what we're making decisions on in our school board and how we're, again, collecting data to make those informed decisions. I also think that we need to create an environment that allows our trusted experts, our educators, to work with some autonomy while being beholden to our oversight. It's come to my attention that some of our charter schools don't have as much oversight as some of our public schools, and I think that we need to definitely be making some adjustments and doing some research there. And then, of course, it's to our students. I think that that's definitely the main goal of our school board is to make sure that our students are getting the greatest access that they can to a secular, equitable, honest education.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll begin with candidate Griggs. What steps would you support to ensure student safety and to prevent misconduct by school district employees?
I would, first of all, make people very aware of how different schools are today than they were when you and I went to school. You cannot get into a building, any building that I've been to in my role as a substitute teacher, without identification and assurance that you are somebody who is entitled to be in the building. So there are changes. The buildings are locked down. They do lockdown drills. I don't know, when I was a kid, I remember doing duck and cover drills. But it's a very different environment now. I think people need to be aware of that. It's a serious issue. It's unfortunate that we are at that point with safety. But recently we had 4 years ago or so, there was a controversy related to having school resource officers on campus and what roles they should play and where they should be involved and where they shouldn't be, and whether there should be police cars on campuses at high schools and that sort of thing. It's very important to reflect the community's interests and concerns in that discussion, and I would do everything I can to make sure that those concerns are addressed. But I think schools are about as safe as we can possibly make them right now under the current circumstances we face.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler.
When I think about this question, I often, have an experience and background in organizational culture and change. I think about being a multi-layered approach. Oftentimes we can have policies and practices in place, but really behind that, what shapes that is our philosophies or what we believe to be true. So I think to ensure safety, we need to make sure we have that multi-layered approach. Does our culture reflect the policies that we put in place? And is our practices reflective of the policies? Are we following through with what we say we're going to do? I think infrastructure is also in place. Do we have a baseline? Do we know that all schools have the same entrance in terms of safety and making sure that the folks in the building are doing okay? I think that's important to look at. And the last thing that I would say that I think in terms of safety and support is making certain that we have clear criteria. So I like to believe that whatever you put into the mix is what you get out. And so have we clearly defined what we mean by safety so that we can start working towards that goal?
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
I think there's a number of things that probably need to evolve when we think about safety and misconduct within the schools. And one of those I think that is key for me is to think about how we can evolve our culture of trust for each individual within the school. What we can see whenever a bad thing happens is almost every single time people look around and go, we knew this was going to be a problem. That's startling when you really think about it. And so if we can create a culture where people can point things out safely without fear of being a tattletale, without fear of being labeled as a bad person or something like that, the intent is to create that safety. Not to get somebody in trouble, but to redirect people who may need more assistance, be they a student, a teacher, whoever it is. I would imagine there's not a single one of you who would get onto a plane if it weren't for the fact that they actually have to speak out for safety. Why can't we have that culture in our schools? And I think important things like that, to share and work with our students, our staff, and everyone involved to say, let's do things differently so we can create that safe environment.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
This is something that's really important to me with children in the school district. I don't ever want my children to be afraid to go to school. And I know that often I hide my fear. It's unbelievable to me that our schools have become battlegrounds in this country. And I think really serious action needs to be taken immediately. I'm a proponent of digging into mental health. I think that that's square one. We need to make people feel like they are seen and heard where they're at, and we need to be making sure that we're turning out adults that feel like they belong in our community. But this culture of fear and culture of lack of safety in our schools has got to stop. So I feel really strongly that that's something that needs to be addressed immediately. And I know that that's going to take a multifaceted approach. We're going to have to talk to experts in mental health and our educators and our families. And again, just be really clear with information to come to very well thought out decisions about how we move forward.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So student safety is my main inspiration to run. So this is one I've thought about quite a bit. There's a lot of different aspects to safety because, of course, there's student-on-student bullying, and you got to worry about school shootings and things like that. The thing that got me paying attention was staff-on-student assaults and harassment. And I think the first thing that we have to look at with that is whether or not we are creating a culture that respects the humanity of all our students, not just the ones that happen to look like the teacher that is working with them. I think that's really where we need to start. And then in addition to that, one of my other main things that I'm interested in is protecting workers' rights. And the thing that got me paying attention to that is the number of staff that have reached out to either directly to me or to someone who knows me or said elsewhere and it got back to me that they tried to report, teacher John Doe for doing such and such to a student. And, they were either blown off or threatened for their efforts. And I really think that what we need to look at with that is what are we doing to make sure that our admin is functioning with an understanding of we have whistleblower laws, we have mandatory reporter laws, we need to be respecting those because we are not only setting our students up for failure, but also our staff.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll begin with candidate Ziegler. This is the question. What recommendations would you make regarding the long-term need for climate-controlled classrooms? Are there any other maintenance priorities in the district that you see need addressing?
I think for me, a lot of times when people are, it can be related to air conditioning within our schools when we think about climate. I would like for us to try to think about alternative pieces that can save us long term and are sustainable. An example I would give is like a green wall, right? Have we considered what kind of building materials we're using? Can we build plants? There's different practices where it creates condensation and it creates a way to cool a building. And so, how do we look at all the different ways to which we might address that? It can also be used as an educational opportunity for our students to begin to understand how you grow a plant from seed and keep it growing and things like that. So I would lead into that to get us to consider and think about. But even with adding or additions, we have to think about deferred maintenance as well within our buildings and how are they going to sustain. A new building's not going to be created tomorrow. And so how do we address that as well? How do we look at and analyze and assess our buildings and do an equity audit across the different buildings to make sure that they're getting what they need and whatnot, and we're not focused or paying attention. So to me, it really is what are the best practices that are associated with climate change, and how might we even, for instance, seek out the seed certification to indicate how well we are doing in terms of our climate practices.
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
I think for at least the next few years, we can carry on with the plan that we've implemented with the passing of the mill levy, because we know that a lot of our schools need air conditioning, and we've got to have climate control for our kids and our staff to be able to effectively teach and learn. And so we have to carry on that work regardless. Embedded longer term than that, we absolutely should be working with the community to identify alternatives for creating buildings that are more temperature sensitive, more climate friendly, more engaged in CTE programs with our students can get involved to be part of the planning process. What a great way for them to learn something that they can apply into their future careers potentially. And so we have a lot of opportunities for things like that. And even when we're thinking about deferred maintenance and items that need to be done, a lot of that again is already in progress with engaging into the CTE programs, but expanding that. And again, offering opportunities for our students to be involved as part of the process so they can also learn. And I think we just lean into that. The community is very, very involved with all these things, and we just engage really heavily into that. Let's partner. Let's do this.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
I couldn't agree with Karanda and Andrew more. We have a world-class energy lab here in Fort Collins through Colorado State University. We have really engaged and forward-thinking students in our high schools right now, and I think there's an amazing opportunity there to get them thinking about what will make their schools not rely on fossil fuels in the future. I think that they're very savvy and understand that they need access to clean air and clean water moving forward. So I don't think that air conditioning is the answer. I think that it will help our kids have more access to hours in a classroom, but I do think that we need to be looking at alternative measures.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So I definitely agree with a lot of what I've heard so far. I agree that air conditioning is something that needs to happen in all of our buildings, and I'm glad that we're working on that. Speaking as the student who was, doing high school in a unair conditioned building and sweating a lot, I can definitely agree that we need to make sure we're getting air conditioning in. And as far as the question goes of, making sure that we're doing environmentally friendly work on our buildings, I think this is a great example of a situation where the board needs to be making sure to look outside of itself. The board is 7 people. You got a handful more people on the superintendent's cabinet, but this is a district of 200,000 people. That is a lot of experience. We have a lot of different construction people that work in town. We have a lot of pro-environmental groups that are all going to have very useful information for us, and we need to be reaching out to those people, getting our options, and making sure that we're choosing things that are not only going to be environmentally friendly, but are going to last as long as possible in the long term.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
The issue is very relevant. We just went through a period in August where we had at least 2 days of early release. And it's interesting to note how climate control is related to so many other things. It caused a big reaction, of course, among parents who had to scramble to get their kids home from school 2 hours earlier than they had on a fairly last-minute basis. There are real discrepancies between new buildings that are built with all the latest technology and energy-saving devices and so forth, and those that need to be retrofitted. We heard at a recent school board meeting that there are some 30 schools that would need to be retrofitted with air conditioning, and then it might take as long as 20 years. I don't think we can take 20 years to resolve this issue. I think we've got to get on it. Maybe we need to put more focus on that as an issue than we have in the recent past, but it's really come to a head. We can't change schedules very readily. We can't push back the start of the school year, for instance, till after Labor Day without a lot of commotion and stress on other parts of our support system. So we've got to figure this out and make it more of a priority, I think.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll begin with candidate Spain. As the education landscape changes, including shifts in enrollment and interest in charter schools, how should the district ensure that students have access to high-quality education and resources?
I think that's, for me, a fairly straightforward response because we have an incredible group of teachers. We have an amazingly engaged community. We know that there's a lot of things that we can lean into educationally to make it very dynamic within the school district and therefore interesting to our students, which means we need to ask them first, what is it you would like to learn? And once we learn that, then we can make the decisions about where to expand those educational offerings, because that's part of being dynamic and engaging for our learners, our students, as a school district, so people want to come and get the education they need. We know they need reading. We know we need to teach them how to communicate through written and verbal skills. All those core things have to exist still. But there are so many other things that we can absolutely be part of giving to them as part of their learning opportunities, and that's where we should be focusing.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
I love that Andrew mentioned listening to our kids. I think that's really important. I think that from what I've seen, there needs to be more dialogue. There needs to be more understanding of what our community needs and wants. We can see with the shifts of students moving to charter schools or school of choice, and that should be informing some of the decisions that we're making around how we're building classrooms in our public schools. I'm extremely encouraged by programs like the Whole Child program that PSD is working on right now that will ensure that kids have access to art and music and PE in schools where it's being cut or shifted and given to classified employees to pick up the torch for instructors that just don't exist. yeah, I think there needs to be a great focus here, and I'm encouraged. I think we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Candidate Carrick.
So I think one place to start with this is, we are definitely having issues with test scores, especially around literacy in this district. I am thoroughly of the opinion if you teach a child to read, they will be able to learn anything down the line after that. So our first step is we really have to focus on those core skills that our students are falling behind in right now. When it comes to, offering other opportunities, I think we also need to consider, you know, not just, well, this school wants to have access to this and this other school wants to have access to that. I want to find creative ways to make sure all of our students have access to those things. For example, I actually know a student who has missed out on scholarship opportunities because we have diversified between high schools so much, because they don't have access to both FFA and debate team at the same high school. And the high schools that do have those are having difficulties working that out, how to make sure that student has access to both of those, let's put it that way. So I think we really need to look at how can we make sure these opportunities are in all the schools, be that by bringing the experts across schools maybe. So maybe one high school electives teacher is working at two schools, things like that. I think these are things that we need to be questioning and considering.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
The state of Colorado has a two-track system for approving charter schools. And one track is to go through what's called the Charter School Institute, which is a state-level organization which can approve charters for schools inside the purviews of existing local school districts. This is a real problem, I think. We have to advocate as forcefully as we can for revisiting that rule about charter school authorization. We cannot contribute to the continued growth of more and more charter schools that don't have the same accountability standards that are imposed on school districts. And so we have to find a balance in terms of providing sufficient curriculum variety and approaches to teaching and instruction that still allow public schools to control the resources that are due them. I think this is a serious issue that is going to take advocacy on the part of many, including the group that I helped found in 2016, 2017, called Advocates for Public Education Policy. It wasn't called that when it started, but it evolved into that. I was the chair of that organization for about 2 years before I had to step down because of my international obligations. But I think revisiting chartering is really important and something that we need to push for.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll start back with candidate Bays again. Long question. In large cities with effective public bus service, I beg your pardon. Please do. Sorry.
I've been sitting here thinking about it so much, I felt like I had. So sorry, y'all. That doesn't count towards my 90 seconds. No. I think the way I would answer that is really thinking about a different education model. I think through every change in society, right, things change. And so how do we shift our model? I had an interview and people was talking about funding, and I was like, why don't we do bake sales? And then someone was like, well, we're working at the state level. And I was like, institutionalizing funding might be a good idea. But what I mean by that is that we got to be able to have short-term and long-term, right? And I know of a school recently that was, their school's raising thousands of dollars. And so how do we think about those pieces? Within that model, I think we have to think about the context of choice. That is what is happening now. We already are on that pathway in terms of school of choice and charters and things. But if we adopt that as the mindset and we start from that place, that might help us address and think about what's coming up. And then lastly, to me, I think it's really important that we have to work with the city as well as the county, that this is not an isolated situation to our school district. Enrollment is shifting all over, the context is changing, and we have to work with them for larger things such as transportation and access across the city.
Thank you, and I apologize. I'm not a good teacher. I didn't see your hand up. So now we will start with candidate Bays with a long question. In large cities with effective public bus service, students use the public bus system to get to and from school. If Fort Collins considers expansion of transport in the future, what advantages or disadvantages do you see to a partnership with PSD transportation funding supporting routes and frequency that would meet student needs?
What advantages and disadvantages? Well, I think it's a great advantage if we can figure out ways to develop collaboration between transport and the school district. Absolutely. One of the things that's going to happen with continued growth, which is projected over the long haul to be quite significant in our part of the country, our part of the state, is that there's going to be need to transport larger numbers of kids over greater distance, most likely, because we're not going to be able to do it within the confines of our current building footprint. So I would be strongly in favor, as I am in favor of responding to general budget cuts with putting a lot of our energy as board members and as a district on developing stronger and even more comprehensive partnerships with a range of different groups, including transport among them.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler?
Yeah, so I think I actually love that idea. I think there's a lot of advantages. So often, choice or options in a district is based upon transportation. So someone may not be able to participate in a certain program at a school because they don't have a way to get there during the daytime. And so if we are expanding our transportation, that's to me going to be a benefit for our students. I also think with that, there becomes a shift in resources. Often transportation can be an issue in terms of resources. To me, this looks like we are expanding our resources and being able to be in partnership with others. Disadvantages to me play out in terms of like, we love our clear skies, myself included. And so what does that look like with an increase in transportation? But then from a district perspective, it changes where the locus of control is and how we manage and navigate that relationship and partnership. And to me, it goes back to my previous answer, right? It requires us, again, to have a shift in our education model, a shift in where resources and control lies. But to me, I think it could be an advantage, most importantly, because it's student-centered and it helps all of our students participate in all of our activities.
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
This is an issue that I know the previous school boards have actually been engaged in, at least discussing the possibility. And of course, there are a number of barriers to doing it currently, not the least of which is there aren't enough buses yet, of course, through the city. But we also recognize that there aren't enough buses, more specifically bus drivers, for the school district. And so they continue to look at possibilities. And I think for me, one of the things I would want to have answered before we go too far is to make sure that all busing, no matter who it is going to be safe for the students, which I know is, of course, something that takes quite a bit of effort. We want to make sure that if you're on a public bus or on a school bus, you get the same feeling of safety. You don't have to worry about anything happening on the bus. And so we certainly want to navigate those types of things. But as we see the city grow and the bus routes grow, I think this is definitely an option for us that we can lean into and work very closely with the city to identify options that would give us a lot more flexibility for students that may have to go back and forth even during the day to different schools for different programs and take advantage of those educational opportunities.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
I think this is a brilliant idea. I love consolidation in the form of efficiency. I think that getting more kids on one bus at a time will end up giving the city less pollution in the end. So this seems like a pretty elegant solution to a transportation problem. I also think that it could help us with start times at school. I have a sixth grader who catches the bus at 6:50. It's really early. And he does really well with it, but I know if he had another hour to sleep, he'd be thrilled. So, I think that using the public school bus system is great. And that inclusive piece of the district working with the city transportation is just really forward thinking. I think that that's where we need to be leaning in.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So I feel like Andrew kind of took the words out of my mouth here a little bit. Speaking as the parent of a student who was abused on a PSD school bus, I immediately have some questions about how our student safety would be ensured if we're doing a collaboration. However, I do absolutely recognize that there are a lot of perks that this could bring to the school district. But I have a lot of questions that I would want answers to, and to make sure that we were collaborating with City Council on ideas like this about before I would approve something like that.
Thank you. This next question, Candidate Ziegler, you can begin. It's a question from the audience. Does evidence exist that supports having homework in elementary school before middle school? I think the question is there evidence that supports the efficacy of homework in elementary school?
Yeah, I can speak to this. I like this question. So, based on what I know and who I've spoken with, is that there's not necessarily evidence. There's evidence that homework is not beneficial for students, and which is why we don't see it as often. I'll share a personal example with you. So my son, my oldest, in third grade, they took away the homework. I was like, what? I was like, I'm gonna need you all to send some homework home with him or something. Rip it out of the book. I don't know what you were thinking. But over time, as I've seen, that it hasn't made that much of a difference in not having. Because the reality is this: when that homework is at home and a student gets stuck, it is often already the families are at an advantage or in a privileged position that are able to help their child with that homework. Otherwise, it just impacts students and make it more complicated. It furthers sugar who moves ahead and who does not. And so in terms of that evidence is not there. Also, it helps teachers. How are we teaching during the school day to make certain that students get everything they need during the school day? What I know to be true is that the best way for a student to succeed in school is to make certain that they are reading at night for at least 20 to 30 minutes. And that I know the research does say.
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
I certainly can't point out any citations for what is said and what is not said related specifically to homework. What I can say is there's, of course, an entire field related to development of the child. And in elementary school, they're much less oriented on things that we would probably consider traditional homework, the concrete, do your math tables or some of those things like that. They're going to be engaged in activities, just like what we see throughout the day. That's their age group. That's what they need. They need to play with their friends. They need to engage creatively through action more than memorization. This is what the educational literature does say. And there's lots of different ways we can perhaps provide additional tools that do go home, not necessarily in the form of assigned homework, but perhaps in helping the parents who may not have as much time on a daily basis, or perhaps if they're working with their siblings, their older siblings, who might be able to help them with something about how to better learn how to read. Each student has individual needs. If we can arrange an array of different information, and the teachers already do a lot of this, I know, but if we can promote that so each student can have different things that they can go home and actually have fun and feel like they're playing. It's a form of homework, but not what we would consider traditional homework. I think that's the type of things that we can engage and leverage for a good learning experience. And absolutely with the reading, if they can do that at home, that's the biggest single homework assignment I would have for any kid in elementary school.
Thank you. Candidate Bass.
I don't know the data on this either. I don't know what we've collected as far as proficiency in reading and math if you're sent home with homework. I do know that my children are thriving, and they were made to read 20 minutes or 30 minutes a night. And so I do know that has been really helpful for my family. When I was younger, just speaking personally, I didn't have a lot of homework. And then when I went to university, I felt very underprepared. So I do think that there are ways to prepare our kids and make them university ready if that's their path. I also think that there are a number of our kids that need access to other kinds of education. And I'm super encouraged by this district. I just got to go to the P-Tech opening at Poudre and see a totally different way to approach education and taking our kids forward into a pretty technologically advanced future.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So I would love to see more data on this, but the information that I have seen is that homework has minimal to no benefit for elementary students. I do agree with a lot of what's been said, and I think that it's really important that our kids get to go home and have a break to just hang out, have fun, do activities that they're enjoying rather than just going home and doing more work on that class that maybe isn't their favorite. But I think there's also an aspect worth considering. Elementary kids are just sponges. Everything they are doing, they are learning something new. So, the fact that they're not sitting down and doing math problems at night does not mean that they're not learning something. If they're sitting there cooking with their parents, they're learning how to cook. They're learning how to clean. They're having conversations with their family. They're reading for fun. They're out playing with their friends and gaining social skills that they need. So I don't think sitting down and doing homework needs to be the focus as far as making sure our kids are learning things. And since I got a few seconds left here, when it comes to, kids going home and reading, the school that I went to actually had a great program for that. Our librarian would actually call around to houses late at night at random just to see, hey, is your kid reading? And if we were, we got a prize. So I think stuff like that is cool, fun solutions to try.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
Sabrina's comments are very similar to what I would have to say about this issue. I think we need to remember as adults that kids are kids. They are whole human beings. They are maybe still budding and blossoming, but they are whole human beings. They need time to be kids, to have fun with their friends, to socialize. I had the good fortune, one of my very first substitute teaching assignments was to step in right as the pandemic was being addressed in the spring of 2021. I had the good fortune, actually, of substituting, long-term substituting for the rest of the spring at Poudre High School for one of my former students from UNC who was on maternity leave. Talk about a sweet situation for me. It was very moving, and it made me aware, too, as the teachers at Poudre High School were dealing with the students coming back into the classroom and what to do about the kids that weren't ready to come back or whose parents weren't sure they wanted them in the school yet. But the response after spring break, which is when they implemented inviting students back into the school, was just amazing. You could feel the energy and the enthusiasm for the kids, among the kids, about being back in school. We got to remember that when we think about things like homework.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll begin with candidate Spain. How would you address the declining enrollment and excess capacity? What should we do with the 6,500 empty seats in all 50 buildings. We have 1,000 fewer kindergartners than we graduated in May of 2025.
This is where I have to love me some data, because projections are extremely difficult. And so what we can look at is what has happened before we get into the business of projecting. And ultimately, there's a few key numbers that we need to look at for where we've been historically. What actually is our number of students that are K-12 age? And then we can start to break them down as to who's in homeschool, who's in PSD schools, who's in charter schools, etc. Because through looking at this and working with key people who really understand numbers, and that takes a lot of expertise to then build into our models, because we don't know if we're going to do in Italy and our birth rate's going to drop out. That can be very scary when we think about what's happening in Italy and Japan, for instance. Or are we going to start turning up, as we've seen in some of our more recent data? But we don't know what next year is going to be, or the year beyond that. And so we have to work together to make our best guess. Create some opportunities for education that fill in our empty spaces and allow for additional opportunities, and work with the community to create solutions that are probably going to be multifaceted but serve the district as well as the whole community.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
I think that we need to do a lot of listening. I think that our last foray with school consolidation really informed how the community views the school board and the decisions that they're making, that they feel like they're making them in a vacuum or behind closed doors. And I really want to make a huge push for transparency. I think that if people understand why and how the decisions are being made the way that they are, you might even get some engagement. You might get folks on board to say, yes, that is the best thing for our school district. I've also been hearing a lot of information around the mill levy language and people's upset around when the ballot was passed, it said small neighborhood schools, and some schools are also being privy to some of the dollars that were set aside for these small neighborhood schools that are not considered neighborhood schools, but are actually intentionally small. And so I think that we just need to be really careful moving forward and, again, be really transparent. I think that people need to see how money is being spent so that they understand the results that we're getting.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So I feel like there's a few factors that have to be considered. First off, if the birth rate is dropping and there's fewer students coming in because of that, we as a board don't have any control over that. We just got to work with what we got on that front. What we do have control over are efforts to draw people back into the district, either from outside of the district completely or from kids that decided to go to charter schools. And I think we need to be taking a close look at why people are leaving the district, either to go live outside of it or just to attend a charter school or a private school, and try to bring those kids back, find ways that we can bring those kids back. Did they leave because of bullying? Let's look at our bullying policy at the schools where these kids are leaving for that reason, things like that. But there's also, I think, opportunity for us to be collaborating with the city. For example, one thing I've heard is we have some neighborhoods around certain schools where there's a lot of empty nesters living in large houses. So I think we need to be talking to city councils about things like, well, what can we do to try and draw families into those neighborhoods? Is there a new building project that we can put in? Is there some new program that might encourage, those families of two to move into a smaller home and put that house on the market? These are questions that I think we need to be considering.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
I attended a community conversation that was held by three of the current school board members at Olander Elementary very recently, and Mr. Schoenbauer said, we've got to make sure we have all the facts. The interesting point about this whole concern about declining enrollment is that even within the consulting report of the firm that was hired to do the analysis of trends in population within the school district, there was conflicting information about how much decline there actually was, and there was reference to the growth of the community at the same time. So there were contradictions even within that report. But in addition to that, the state demographer has projected significant growth over the next few years, to the point where 5 years from now, we're going to be bursting at the seams. So, for example, shutting down effective programs, closing down schools that are working well, even if they're under-enrolled at the current time, is a risky business if we're going to face expansion and shortly thereafter. So we've got to be very, very thorough, make sure we get to all the facts and make these decisions very, very carefully.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler.
I think first we have to pay attention. Just because something's extremely loud doesn't always mean it's the truth or the path we ought to take. I think I hear oftentimes about the declining enrollment. That does not mean it's set in stone, and that's the narrative we have to approach. We can also have an optimistic narrative. We have an opportunity to deepen the learning and enrichment within our district as a result of these spaces. That language itself influences and shapes the way that we might approach that space. What I would say is, one, making sure that we stay within our mission as a district and not have, get into the business of doing other things and really understand what our business is. Secondly, making certain that whatever we do is student focused. In fact, some of those empty spaces could become more creative spaces. Maybe we could have more maker spaces across the district or more CTE spaces. And so we have to be careful to not get into this place of a land grab, if you want to use a term, just because that narrative is out there. So we have a responsibility as a district to help shape that narrative. And I think when we do that, we can make better decisions about what to do with those spaces.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll begin with candidate Bays. What is your position on how public comment should be handled at school board meetings?
I'm very grateful that our school board decided to keep public comment at each of our Board of Educator meetings. I think that it's really important that we're having open dialogue with our families and our educators. I think the 45-minute slot seems to be enough at the moment. And I'm really excited about these neighborhood meetings that the board is putting on. I was also at the meeting last week at Olander, and it just felt like such an open, safe space for people to say what they wanted our board of directors to hear. So I don't think that we can build sustainable community without having open dialogue.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So this is a topic I've talked about at length on my campaign pages. I think we're up to about 45 minutes of content just on this topic. Suffice to say, I am very much in favor of expansion of public comment options, not lowering those options. And one thing I'd really like to see is the ability to do call in public comment, and just instead of having to come in and do it in person. I think it would also be really nice if people could write in an email to a specific email address and say, "Hey, I'd like this to be read as part of public comment." I think these are options that ought to be on the table for people who maybe don't feel comfortable getting up in front of a camera on a live stream and commenting the way I have on many occasions. So could carry on for a long time. I am very much in favor of the First Amendment. I want to see public comment opportunities both through literal public comment at board meetings and also other opportunities such as listening sessions, expanded, if anything, certainly not decreased.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
So the fact is, we have a wide range of ways people can participate. And the policy that we're talking about that was recently voted on is changeable. It can change simply by the board saying we're going to expand this time. There's no requirement that it be passed by law or anything like that. So, and I think it reflects any given point in time how much controversy there's going on and how many people want to actively participate. But we need to continue to expand opportunities for public comment, like the open conversations that the superintendent is holding, and like the community conversations that several of us attended last week. It's essential to build the community's trust in the school system, to keep it strong and to keep it healthy and positive, that people feel like their concerns are being addressed and heard. And I think that's a fundamental role for a board member, is to make sure that the community, the people we come in contact with who approach us, know that their voice is being heard and that we're helping make sure that action is taken as appropriate to address their concerns.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler.
I'm in support of public comment. In fact, I would like to make it a little bit more humane. I think, like, can we at least acknowledge people for being brave enough to stand in front of a microphone and share what's being said? I believe that a simple thank you can go a long way. So that's one thing I would like to see change, and I'll definitely advocate for. I also think that we need to be flexible. The reality is, like, meetings can be long, and I believe that we also signed up to be on school board and we were elected. And so how do we serve the needs of our community? There will be times where the meetings and public comment will be longer because we may have a need for that conversation. A great example recently, if you notice, consolidation, there was a need to shift. And I think we have to be willing to shift and be flexible with our comment. And, I agree with my colleagues here. How do we promote it more and what that means? How do we educate people on what public comment is and how to come and how to share ideas and things like that so they can fully participate in the process? So that would be what's important to me, not simply to have it, but definitely make sure that it's accessible as well as inclusive.
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
I know as one of the ones that voted to keep public comment, I think it's essential to what we do to have that interaction with the community in various forms. And I know I personally am pushing to have a web page / whatever that looks like to share when we will be available for those comments and to have those discussions. I know some of that's there already, but even at a personal level, if I'm going to be holding a coffee session or whatever it might be, it'd be nice to be able to make that public so people could come and chat in a way that, again, is accessible to those who would like to have those discussions. I would say there's also a word of caution, though, because if we start expanding into different formats, I think we need to recognize that while speech is free, it must also be responsible. And I am not going to be in favor of people being able to submit something for which they are not also having some measure of accountability, because we are dealing with very hateful and threatening things coming to the board already. And that's not okay. Let's have the dialogue openly and responsibly, and let's make it as accessible as possible.
Thank you. With this round of questions, we'll begin with candidate Herrick. What role should the school board play in decisions about which books and instructional materials are available in our schools?
So to some degree, there has been a court ruling on this because there was a recent court ruling saying that parents have the right to opt out of their children reading certain materials or being involved in certain lessons based on religious beliefs. But I believe that the board is generally going to be the one setting the tone for what is going to be standard in the district. My personal opinion is that inclusivity should be the standard. welcoming and respectful tones should be the standard that we're promoting in this district. And, there are going to be parents that say, I don't want my kid learning about this particular subject, and they have the right to opt out of that particular subject. But I think it is our responsibility to set the tone that our lesson plans and the materials that our students are exposed to are welcoming and inclusive.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
The big challenge with curricular materials is that we, as board members, generally, we're going to have to rely on expertise of specialists in curriculum, on teams of people who teach reading, for example, teachers who teach reading, primary grades and higher, and sometimes materials are adopted without the adequate input of teachers themselves. How it would fit the students that they come in contact with. And so I think as school board members, we are very reliant on that information to support decisions made about curriculum. I am also acutely aware, and I used to teach my future teacher students, if you will, if you can follow that chain, future teacher students, that they should be very careful and conscious of the communities that they live in and the kind of things that would be controversial materials, and to give parents options, to identify materials in advance, that if parents want to exercise options to not have their kids read certain kinds of materials, that there be options built in for kids to otherwise engage during those times when that kind of instruction is going on. And I believe in parental rights in that sense very much.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler.
First of all, I don't think any of those decisions should lie solely with the board. And I believe that our district materials, curriculum, as well as books, should reflect the diversity of our students that exists within our schools. Each student is going to have a different experience. And when I talk about pathways and tools, they should be able to find things that make sense, helps them make sense of their world. And so with that, I really truly believe that we should support the expertise of our librarians and folks who select curriculum and whatnot. I think we need to be transparent in that process. Sometimes I think that's the hard part. How did we land upon this particular curriculum? How are things chosen to be put into the library? And so that could probably help as well. And to me, when I'm engaging with folks who may have a variety of perspectives, let's get to the heart of the issue. It may not be the surface level, the curriculum or books or whatever. It could be something else. And so how do we really engage in the conversation and get to that something else? Because that to me is really how we're going to solve that problem, and not be afraid to confront the issue, because it is here, and by avoiding it, it just simply makes it worse.
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
I think I'm going to echo probably a fair number of comments, but the reality is we want to find a curriculum that best fits our district. And we do that through working with our experts, be it our teachers, our CSU colleagues, our parents. Everyone can be part of this process, because there's a lot of different curricular styles that are out there. Some of them come boxed up for you, you just plug and play kind of thing. Hard to see that's ever going to work for a district like this, where we want to promote high quality education. We're going to be much more complex than that. So let's work with the community to figure out what that looks like, because it's not even just about this community. We all live on a big blue marble. And how are we going to help our students learn about that? And so we have to think about those pieces as well, and how we're going to engage a process of growth of learning through those stages of growth, from elementary all the way up, so they can learn about all those things appropriately. And things like opt-outs are going to be part of that process, because we know there are topics that aren't always popular for every family. My parents had to sign for, can he go to the sex education class? I'm sure that's still an opt-out. And there's other classes, other topics that are like that. And that's great. That's part of the process and why we should work with our community to develop any of these options through our curriculum.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
I do think it's the role of the school board to have oversight and make sure that once our district decides on curricula that it is being used across the board. I've been hearing whispers of of educators being not well educated as to a new literacy program that was rolled out a couple of years ago, and some educators decided just not to teach it. Those feel like really deep-seated issues to me. It feels like, again, it goes back to that transparency issue of educators feeling like they're just being told what to do by the board or the superintendent instead of brought into an environment where they feel like they're actually engaged and that they actually get to have an opinion about how these things are rolled out and that they feel appropriately up to speed. So I don't think that it's the role of the board to create the curriculum. I do think that it is part of our role in oversight as board members to make sure that our educators are adhering to the curriculum that we've all agreed upon as a community. And that should be delegated by the experts in our community to reflect our community. I love that you said that, Karonda. I definitely think that across the board, kids at Fossil Ridge should be taught similar things to kids at Poudre High School.
Thank you. Our next question round will begin with candidate Griggs. How will you hold PSD accountable to students, families, and staff from groups we have traditionally underserved, including both race, minority, status, and abilities?
This is a huge issue. It is probably most of what I based my career on. I chose to be a teacher of teachers who specialize in second language education, and language education is closely tied to cultural education. And so I had a course I taught called The History of Language Minorities Students in the U.S. School System as an example of the kind of courses that I taught. I also taught, fundamentally, I was focused on teaching teachers who don't speak the same language as their students, how to work with that, how to manage that challenge. And so I am very deeply committed to that. I had a question come up at a conversation the other night about what can we change? What is one thing we can change? One thing we can change, and one reason I chose teacher education as my focus within the field of education, is that we can change how people perceive each other. We can do it gradually, slowly. We have to deal with what their past impressions, stereotypes that they may have carried with them have been, and how that affects how they will interact with their students going forward. And so it's a very interdisciplinary approach, if you will, considering all the social sciences. But we must start with working with teachers and their attitudes and so forth.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler.
I have a friend who often says the phrase out of sight, out of mind. And so I think one thing that we really definitely need to start with is representation. What do our classrooms look like? What do our buildings look like, right? Where do we keep things front and center so that we can consider the experiences of our students? I also want to go back to this idea of community comment. And when I speak to access, how do we make sure that community voices are present within our processes and we hear from them and create good spaces for folks to share their ideas with us? I think we need to do some structural stuff. Have we completed an equity audit? Have we actually looked across the district at different schools, different classrooms, different spaces to understand the shared experience of students within our district? And lastly, in order to understand the unique characteristics and experiences of our student populations, we have to disaggregate the data and we have to start by collecting the data. I'm not going to understand the experience of disabled students if we don't pay attention to their experience and hear information about that. How can we address it? And to me, that's the minimum baseline. And from there, we have to incorporate some policies, some culture change, and so forth in order to address those students' needs.
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
I think the first thing we have to do is address what it means to be accountable. And that probably means setting benchmarks. What is acceptable for any of the groups that were listed? And therefore, what was the existing problem for each of those groups listed in their own particular ways? Because they're going to have different challenges, different issues, different things that need to be achieved if we're identifying that they're not meeting the thresholds that we determine are appropriate. So there's our bar for the different groups. Now we have to analyze. We have to look, see what's going on. Why aren't they meeting those thresholds that we just set? And we have to work with our community to say, right, what does that look like for you? How does this get achieved? Do we have to work with identifying a deeper dive into each of those groups with more outside help to help us understand? All these things are really, really challenging, because that will then lead into making really good decisions about how we're going to fix the problem. Because we can't just sit there and say we're going to add paraprofessionals to the room and pretend that's going to magically fix it unless we've gone through a process. And I expect people like that will be extraordinarily valuable, depending on the threshold that we're needing to achieve for which group. And each of those are going to have some different needs. And that's where we, again, are going to depend on your expertise in the community to help us work through that as parents, as business owners, as experts in the various fields.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
I agree that this is a data issue, and I'm really excited that our state has decided to pass House Bill 50-250 to make sure that every elementary school child from kindergarten to fifth grade gets tested for dyslexia starting in 26-27 school year. I believe that collecting data like that is going to inform how we craft classrooms that are able to reach kids with different abilities. I can't say enough about data around that kind of issue. As far as kids from different backgrounds, I also think that we just need to be creating spaces that really celebrate kids for their diversity. And I'm a firm believer that diversity is what makes this country great. And I think that needs to be in our curricula.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So, speaking as a queer parent to a disabled child, I feel like I have a very good understanding of the fact that I have personal experience with some of these marginalizations, but other ones, I have no idea what these people have gone through living their own experience. So I feel like one of the first things we got to do is sit down and listen to those communities, hear what their needs are, hear what they think is going to be the most beneficial to them. But across the board, we just have to be the ones setting a culture of respect in this district. We have to be celebrating differences between our kids and our staff members, not just tolerating it. I think that's going to be a really important factor in that we need to be looking at what specific groups need the specific help, and also making sure that people have respect for the fact that that's okay, that we need to help these certain people in a slightly different way than these other people, because that is what creates equal opportunity for everybody. And really, I think what it comes down to from the board is we need to be making sure we're setting policy that will enforce that culture, and then actually enforce those policies.
Thank you. This is a related question, in my mind anyway, and we'll begin with candidate Ziegler. How should the district support students' mental health and well-being when setting priorities and allocating resources?
I was writing down them some long questions. I don't have that good of a memory. So what I would say is, again, I don't know. I always start with culture. We have to acknowledge it, right? We have to understand the experiences that our students are having. Like, what is their world? That's where I would start with. What causes stress? Like, I think about my own self as a parent. A stressor is getting my kids out the door every morning. So, what is the stressors for our students? And what does that result in? So, that would be first. I think we need to prioritizing by also tapping into networks that may already exist in terms of mental health services within our communities. We also, I think, institutionally as a district, have to consider all the different ways to which our students get access to mental health. I can share a personal story of my son. He wanted to seek out therapy, and it took me a long time to identify a therapist for him. I had been provided a list that was not update, and it was a journey. And so I think, how do we create, again, pathways for folks to make it easy and accessible, and not view mental health through one lens, but fully understanding the scope of what mental health is? I think that's where we start. So to me, it's about understanding so that then we can put things into practice.
Thank you. Candidate Spain.
I think we need to look at districts that have had success with this. We can even look at our own school district that had a wonderful program right up until the funding was basically taken away. And unfortunately, a lot of those individuals that were here actually providing a lot of these mental services had to go somewhere else because the grant funding disappeared. And it's come back and we could reapply for it. Oh, but wait, it's for something different now. So we have a hard decision about how to readdress getting those people back, or similar people, of course, who can actually be a part of that effective program, because different students have different needs. Some of them don't need much at all, and that's great. Some of them we won't hear about until they start to have problems, and we need to have networks in case of what that looks like. So that's part of changing that culture, because I can tell you as a 30-year paramedic, oftentimes you had to depend on the people around the individual to see what was different. And so why don't we engage in that part of the process as well and actually bring each other up as part of our well-being? And so we have a lot of people to bring in, a lot of people to engage, and a lot of money to probably find, unfortunately, which is not going to be easy. Because if we're going to be serious about this in an era where there's a tremendous shortage of mental health, we're going to have a very steep uphill battle to be able to resource that appropriately.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
This is a moment to focus on the fact that school is not just reading, writing, and arithmetic. We're actually helping to build human beings. This is our kids' first experience in a community, and we need to make sure that they feel like they belong and like they're cared for. And mental health is a huge part of that. I'm grateful that we have confidentiality in the state, that kids can go and see their counselors, and that counselors that once kids are 12 don't have to report to their parents. I think that's really important. And so I definitely am in the camp that resources should be allocated to mental health. And I also agree with Karanda that we have lots of opportunity in our community to cross-resource. We have an incredible resource with Summit Stone that is also terribly underfunded. And my hope is that we can find our way to working with organizations like that and actually aim to increase their funding across the board.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So I agree with a lot of what's been said so far, but one topic I feel like really hasn't been covered is the concept that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I say that from a very specific point of view here because my daughter is one of the unfortunate students who ended up in therapy because of how she was treated by a school employee. And so I think, as much as we need to make sure that these services are available, we also need to be making sure that we're looking at our policies and our enforcement of those policies to make sure that we are not the problem for these students.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
I was I had the experience of being in Thompson School District for 3 months. I had a role, social emotional learning specialist, and what had happened is that Thompson had gotten some special grant money to support responding to the impact of the pandemic. Really, is what it was. If you think about, for many kids, they missed a year of social development that was very costly for them in terms of remembering what it was like to be in a classroom and share space and share goodwill, we hope, with their classmates and that sort of thing. And so that was a very eye-opening experience for me, and really brought home this business of the whole child, which I talk about on my website at some length. Everybody shares a responsibility for the well-being of the whole child. In good schools and effective schools, what they do is they have teamwork. They figure out how to use people with their strengths to, for example, give kids 5-minute breaks from the classroom. This is something that has changed since you and I were in school. We had to sit in our chairs and behave ourselves. We didn't get a choice to walk around the classroom for walk around the perimeter of the school for 5 minutes so we could bring ourselves back together. This is big.
Thank you so much. Your answers and insights have been wonderful, but I'm afraid we are out of time, and it's time for your concluding statements. And we'll begin with candidate Spain, and I'm afraid I must impose on you, because we've gone a little over, to limit your conclusions to 1 minute. Thank you.
I suppose my closing statement fundamentally comes down to this: get out and vote. That is such an important thing for us. And picking the right people for the Board of Education is essential with the challenges that we're going to be dealing with. And so I hope you've gained some great insight into who you might be voting for tonight, and that we'll work with you long term here in the school district to make the decisions that are best for the community and for each of you individually, because we've got to listen to you and hear your stories, learn from them, and do the best we can for the students.
Thank you. Candidate Bays.
I'm going to piggyback on what Andrew said, and I'm going to say vote early, because we've been cutting turf, and you will not get texted or have your door knocked on if you get your ballot in. So if you want to quit being bothered by all of us, do that. And I really just want to reiterate my connection to our community. I want to leave you with the thought that I think that what we need right now is collaboration and transparency and really constructive conflict resolution. I hope that you'll think of that when you're filling out your ballot, and choose your candidates that have been endorsed by your teachers union. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you. Candidate Herrick.
So I agree with everyone so far. Definitely get out and vote. And I also just want to encourage you, when you guys are getting ready to fill out your ballots, make sure you are taking the time to look at the candidates' websites, what they have been saying, not just listening to, the rumor mill that's going around, because there's a lot of that in every election. And the best way to get an informed decision is to go look at what candidates are actually saying. And I just want you all to know that a vote for me is a vote for someone who is not going to shut up until our kids have what they deserve, which is a safe and good education.
Thank you. Candidate Griggs.
I echo the importance of getting to know the individual candidates. I spent a lot of time writing my website this summer, and I hope you all get a chance to look at it and find a range of issues that are of concern to you and read about what I have to say about them, because that's how you can make an informed vote. There's a lot of talent on this panel here. The one thing I think that distinguishes my candidacy is the depth and range of my experience and my study of the school system for the 35 years I've been doing that. And I think that brings something to the school board that could really enhance and improve its work going forward.
Thank you. Candidate Ziegler.
I want to first thank you all for your time tonight, for being engaged, being here and listening, and giving us an audience. Like, that's nice, not talking to an empty room. I think besides what was shared here tonight, I've experienced with curriculums, budgets, supervisions. But the thing is that being on the board is not just about me and what I bring. It's not just simply sitting on top of on the board. It's also being a part of schools and communities. It's also about constantly learning and adapting, and it's also about you, me, and community. So I hope when you cast your vote that you would consider Karanda Ziegler. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to thank our support team from the city who has made all our technology possible. And I want to thank the audience members for your interest and participation. And now please join me in thanking our candidates for their willingness to serve.